A very good afternoon to one and all. Thank you for joining us today on this International Colloquium on World Freedom of Press Day, brought to you by Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science, Coimbatore. Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science, Coimbatore is a part of Kumaraguru institutions with Kumaraguru College of Technology, KCT Business School, and Kumaraguru Institute of Agriculture, who have exemplified the interdisciplinary approach. As an institution dedicated to learning, we invest in intellectual vitality and engage with stakeholders to make a difference locally and nationally. Our contribution to this shared effort is the unique knowledge, transformative approach, and skill generated by our core activities of education and research. KCLAS is rooted in the cosmopolitan city of Coimbatore in Tamil Nadu, which is traditional, resilient, vibrant. The city is an engine of entrepreneurial spirit and expert, flourishing since Roman times, and also a magnet for innovation, arts, culture, business, science, and technology. Higher education, research, and innovation play a crucial role on supporting social cohesion, economic growth, and global competitiveness. Today, we have with us someone who stands for the same principles that we stand as an institution. Professor Glenn Muschert, Professor of Sociology, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Khalifa University, UAE, has come virtually to discuss on digital divide and digital skills in Turkey. Thank you, Professor Glenn Muschert, for joining us today. I would like to welcome Professor Ananda to introduce the speaker and get the session started. Over to Professor Ananda.
Thank you so much, Professor Pranav, for setting the context for us. Professor Glenn is a professor of sociology in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at Khalifa University, Abu Dhabi, UAE. He has formerly served on the Faculty of Sociology, Social Justice, and Comparative Media Studies at Miami University, USA, and the Law and Society faculty, and as a Law and Society faculty at Purdue University, USA. In the academic fields of sociology, media studies, and justice studies, he has written or edited a dozen academic volumes and special collections of journals, dozens of academic articles, and dozens of chapters in academic volumes. Dr. Muschert has frequently served as a visiting international scholar and advisor and has collaborated research projects in a variety of international contexts, including Turkey, Palestinian State, the United Arab Emirates, Nigeria, South Korea, United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Finland, Greece, and Italy. He has a track record of attracting internal and external funding for several research projects. He has also served as an associate editor for teaching sociology and on the editorial advisory board of various journals such as Social Problems, Secrecy and Society, and the Turkish Journal of Sociology. Since 2009, he has served as secretary and member of the Board of Studies for the Society for the Study of Social Problems. His areas of research interest are in ICT, digital technologies, sustainable development, internet studies, social problems, social innovation, and mass media. It's indeed our honor and privilege to have an academician of his stature amidst us today. I extend a warm welcome to you, sir.
Well, Professor Ananda, thank you so much for this kind introduction. I hope I can live up to the reputation and expectations of our folks assembled today. I just want to start off by giving a word of thanks. I'm honored to be here today in observation of World Freedom of Press Day. I am grateful to Kumaguru College of Liberal Arts and Science and the Department of Visual Communications for inviting me here today. I'm happy. I only hope that one day I will be able to visit in person and we can all be together for academic discussion and maybe to have a tea together, something like that. I also thank the IAMCR for being a sponsor, and the Media and Information Literacy India Network for inviting me today. Thank you in particular to Professor Ananda for inviting me today and for being my kind host. And also thank you to Professor Prof for the kind introduction. So if it's okay, I would like to move forward with the presentation and share some slides. Yes, so well, this is all just my introduction here. I'm Glenn Muschert. I'm professor of sociology at Khalifa University of Science and Technology in Abu Dhabi. And today I'm going to be speaking about digital divide and digital skills in Turkey. Next, please. So the plan of the presentation is to report on the findings of two related studies on the digital divide in Turkey. The first is a more of a quantitative study that involves about 400 participants whose behavior we tracked as they used the internet. And the second is a qualitative study based on a small purposive sample of people that we interviewed from the larger group to learn more about their digital skills. So I would like to mention that copies are available upon request of these two articles, which have both, well, the first is an article, the second is a chapter, and they're both available upon request in PDF copy if you would contact the conference organizers, or also you're certainly welcome to contact me as well. Okay, next, please. So to lay the foundation of the overall perspective, what I study digital divide, which is inequality in the distribution and use of digital technologies, ICT technologies. And the more recent studies have focused on digital skills. So the early digital divide studies were was so-called first level of digital divide, focused primarily on the technical aspects and to a lesser extent the economic aspects, which is whether people had access, connectivity to the internet, or how rapid was the download speed, such as broadband versus dial-up and so on. And in many countries, this is no longer an issue, as smartphones in particular and mobile plans have become quite affordable, and so people can readily access the digital sphere. So the second level of digital divide that has been coming about for more like the study of it anyway, for the last, say, 10 years or so, looks at digital skills. So the idea is that while some people may have access, many people have access, and so therefore they're not technically excluded from the digital sphere, that there are people who lack digital skills, and so that those people who have more advanced digital skills can use the technologies to their advantage, and that those people who have low skills may be left behind and unable to use their skills to their advantage. So there's four types of skills that we look at. There's one which is called the medium-related skills. These are kind of the operational skills, which is like things such as like turning on the computer and connecting the wires and these kinds of things. The operational skills about technically, using the computers or the mobile devices. And there's formal skills that involve things like, people use the softwares or the apps effectively in order to access the digital resources. Those are the two varieties of the medium-related skills. There are also what we call content-related skills. So information skills would be one, which is information is, are people effective at locating the types of information that they need? Are they skilled at finding information that is reliable? You know, sort of this information literacy type of dynamic, whereas people can differentiate kind of reliable sources of information from fake news or biased sources of information. And then finally, there are strategic skills. And the strategic skills are things such as can the people use like virus software? Can they form proper passwords that would be safe and difficult to hack? Can they detect when they're trying to be scammed or phished or the victim of these sorts of things? So in all, the recent study of the digital skills over the last 10 years has been kind of this second level, this newer level of digital divide studies. And so we find that even though people have access in a technical sense, that some people lag behind because their skills are not developed. So I work at a technical university, and so many of my students are STEM, the engineering and work in lab sciences and things like that. And so sometimes they say, why do I need to understand social sciences? And I say, look, it's all about people. The end user of any technology is always going to be, or the ultimate user is going to be a person. And if the people can't use it or do not use it or will not use it for whatever reason, then the technology in a sense doesn't do much for the solutions, the problems that it was created to address. Okay, so next slide, please. So I want to explain to you a little bit about the sample. So the first study involved taking a sample of 400. It ended up to be exactly 400, which is a kind of a nice number, right? Of people from the provinces in northeast Anatolia in Turkey. So this is the side of Turkey that is closer to the Republic of Georgia, also known as Georgistan, Armenia, and Iran. So it's the northeast corner, the top right corner, and we drew people from three provinces, which are known as Bayburt, Erzincan, and Erzurum. And so we identified the households using Turkstat. This is a database that is from the Turkish Statistical Institute. And when we contacted the households, we selected one internet user from identified households. And so to be included, the person had to be only 18 or older and had to be an internet user, even if they, regardless of if they're a computer user or smartphone user. Okay, next slide, please. So I just wanted to give the context. So there's on the left of the screen is Turkey, so Turkey is kind of as the Asian part of Turkey is called as Anatolia, and the western part tends to be kind of more strongly developed and more European in mindset and behaviors, and the eastern part tends to be more conservative and also kind of has a stronger connection, kind of eastward looking towards the Caucasus region or the Central Asian countries as well. And so there's this big divide in Turkey, whereas there's some parts of Turkey and the bigger cities in the west that are very, very kind of modern and very developed. And when you get into the east part of the country, the level of development declines. And so we got this study from the Turkish Council on Social Sciences research to the funding from them to conduct this study because they're concerned that the eastern part is lagging behind. And one solution that they see is to bring in some sort of digital connectivity with the hopes that this would advance the development of this part. So the three provinces that we're studying are on the right side, top right. So there's a blue one, a green one, and a sort of an orange or salmon colored one that are in that region. And so those are the ones where we studied. Next slide, please. So I don't have to explain to anyone in India about this, but I would say it's similar to in India, that these cities are right on the Silk Road, and so they have been the kind of the crossroads of humanity for so many years. And same as you all were mentioning, in many places in India, whenever they build a road or they dig a hole, like, you know, they have to stop because they're unearthing something that is 2,000 years old and has been underneath the ground, and they have to call in the anthropologists and the archaeologists to preserve this stuff. So anyway, I just give you an image of these. The Erzurum province has the largest city in the whole of the East, which itself is named Erzurum as well, and that's Erzurum on the top right. Erzincan province is a bit smaller. The city has about 300,000 people. The top left is Erzurum, and the bottom three pictures are from Bayburt, which is a little bit less of a popular place, but it's also the kind of the center of its province. Yeah, next slide, please. So I now get into the actual details of the study, and what I want to explain before talking about the sample is to clarify kind of how this study worked. How the study worked was that when we identified the participants, we set up a place where they could meet us to do a test on PCs. And the PCs that they were using tracked their behavior. So we would give the users tasks to complete, as simple as, can you turn the computer on, or can you open up a web browser, to others such as, like, can you tell me how to find directions to a place, can you find for me, like, kind of information about voting or something like that. And what we did was we tracked the people as they did these tasks. So they sat down. They were timed tasks, and we first tested whether or not the people could complete the tasks. And the second is that if they did complete the tasks, then we figured out how long it took them to complete the tasks. So the ultimate measures are whether people can complete tasks as in fit skill that are designed to test these different types of digital skills. And the second involves kind of how quickly they can complete those tasks. So this sort of methodology, as you may imagine, is a kind of very it requires a lot of time, because you have to set up the computers, you have to get the people to come to the location, you have to get them to sit down and take the test. But it's worth it in a sense, because it's a direct measure of the participants' behavior. So what we have oftentimes found is that people, when simply asked in a survey questionnaire, like, what is your level of digital skill, they tend to each person tends to find themselves to be, or rate themselves to be, very skilled. Okay, and so this is not really looking at the person's opinion about their skill level, but rather it's a direct observation of whether or not they can complete the tasks designed to measure their skills and so on. So we have a mixture of men and women, people from a variety of age groups, and we also have people from all sorts of different educational levels, from primary school or secondary school only, part secondary school, completing high school, graduate of bachelor's, or even some postgraduate degree holders in our study. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so in this first study, which involved these 400 participants, what we found is that 32.3% of the participants failed all skill tests. So it's nearly 1/3 failed all of the skills tests. So they had in effect, the lowest level. 26% were successful in only one type of the skills, right? And usually these are kind of more technical, simple skills, like turning the computer on and connecting to opening a browser and things like that. And then as we go forward, 15% were successful in 2 of the skills, 15.8 successful in 3 skill types, and only a bit over 10% 9% or almost 11% were successful in all 4 types of the skills. So what we end up with is quite a big distribution of levels of the digital skills among the participants, from the 32% who have the lowest level of skills and then on up to the top 10.8 or 11% who have the highest level of skills in terms of internet use. Next slide, please. Okay, so table 1 here gives us a correlation among the types of the digital skills. And so the operational skills and the formal skills are the ones that are most fundamental, right? And then the information skills and the strategic skills are those that are a bit more advanced. And so there is a correlation between these types of skills and the various types of skills, and they are significant for all of these relationships. So what we could say is that kind of from this is that the internet skills or digital skills are, while we can use an ideal type in the Max Weber sense to identify different forms of digital skills, in reality, these digital skills are very much intertwined with each other. Not in a deterministic kind of way, however, but more in a kind of an intermingled type of way. And so this should be a lesson to us that is, we can perhaps think in some ways about skills as being separate and distinct, but we should also recognize that the digital skills are fundamentally and intertwined with each other. Next slide, please. Okay, so next was the second part of the findings for this first study, which is that the participants are most successful in the formal skills. Okay, so these are things like, turning on the computer and locating the browser and launching the browser and so on. So the formal skills were followed by the operational, informational, and strategic skills, respectively. So the highest level of skills will be among the people with the formal skills and the operational skills. The information and the strategic skills are less developed. Okay, and especially the strategic skill levels are noted to be quite low. Okay, so the strategic skills, again, are skills of like where the person is able to use like antivirus software, protect themselves from malware, software hacks, those kinds of things, as well as to recognize when they're being scammed or phished. It's sort of like self-preservation in the digital sphere. So this finding is very interesting in the sense that, those people who have like operational and formal skills who use the internet may actually be the most vulnerable to kind of hacks and scams because they still lack the strategic skills to protect their own self-interest in the digital sphere. Okay, so while we find that all forms of digital skills are positively related to each other, this is the point I made about the correlation coefficients, this relation is not strictly determined. And so we can look at, to some extent, the acquisition of digital skills as being something that follows a pattern that goes from the operational and formal skills and then followed as the higher level of skill development in the informational and strategic skills. Okay, next, please. So what we find is that age, gender, income, and education are all related to the digital skill formation. Right. So these numbers are the report of a multiple regression on the predictive ability of demographic factors to influence digital skill development. And this is all digital skills. So we had a measure that included all digital skills together, and we also were able to look at individual types of digital skills as well. But what we found is that age and gender, by gender, it was coded as 0 male and 1 female. So is that older respondents and women respondents tended to have a lower level of digital skills, right? So we found that this demographic factor of age, the older the person, the lower their level of skill in general, and also women in general had a lower level of skill than men. However, there's a positive relationship observed between income and education as predicting digital skill development. So the higher the income and the higher the level of educational completion, the more likely it is that the person will have good digital skills. Okay, so next, please. And then we found that this is a report of a regression of internet use habits on digital skill levels. The most interesting one is actually the first one, which is not significant. And the finding here is that years of experience of using the internet is not related to the development of digital skill levels. Okay, so regardless of how long a person had been using the internet in terms of how many years they had been accessing the internet, it did not seem to affect their skill levels. What did affect the skill levels is that the more hours per week a person used the internet, the higher skills they have, the number of devices that they used, because a person could have, for example, a PC at work, a PC at home, and a mobile device and a tablet, any number of devices, but the more devices the person had, then they had higher skill level. And also the number of places to access the internet increased the level of what predicted the level of digital skill development as well. So this would mean, like, kind of, where do you use the internet? Do you use it at the university? Do you use it at work? Do you use it in the coffee shop? Do you use it, like, kind of on the mobile device with the wireless, and so on? Next, please. So I want to switch now and talk about study 2. Okay, so study 2 took a purposive sample of the 400 from the previous study, and we identified low skill users and high skill users, and we interviewed them about their internet use. Okay, so in all, it's a rather modest sample, but it's 8 of them, but they're select. We can verify that we could measure their skill levels, and we could identify them as high skilled users or low skilled users. And so the idea here was to give interviews and let the people to discuss kind of what were their more in-depth perspectives and issues that they felt were related to their internet use. Okay, so there's 2 major types of findings that come out of this one. And the first one is regarding the low skill internet users. Okay, we found that the low skill internet users were aware that they had low skills compared to others. So they kind of could see, if they were a user, they could see kind of other people knew how to do stuff, and they never really, for them, it was kind of like they were aware that there were other people who were much better at them. They would say things such as, like, oh, my friend or my nephew or someone, they go in there and they can do this, and I haven't figured out how to do that. I don't know how to do that. More importantly, actually, is that they were also aware that the high-skilled users get advantages. So they were aware, where they said something like, I see somebody, they get a better deal on a certain product that they're trying to buy, or they had information about, like, health, personal health care or something, or they get better news from the internet, for example. So these low-skilled users are aware that they have low skills, and they're also aware that it's the people with the higher skills who are having greater advantages coming to them because of their use of the skills. Now, this is probably the most important finding, is that the low-skilled users are unsure about how to develop better skills. So they know they have low skills. They're aware that they're missing out, or that they could get more advantages in various areas: do banking, do voting, do voting information, social services, education, and so on. But they just don't know how to develop the better skills. Okay, so this finding is massively important for a place such as Turkey, and I think it applies to many other places as well. I'm sure that it would be relevant to India. Is that the low-skilled users know they have low skills and they feel like they're missing out, but they simply do not know how to get the skills. The primary way that people spoke about getting skills, this is particularly the kind of like older people, is that when I was in school, say primary school, we would have photo day, and everybody would come in wearing nice clothes, and you would get individual photos taken, and then you would also get like the class photo that would be the whole first class, second class, and so on, for that year. And then so what happened is, everybody came to expect these photos, right? We knew that it was coming. So grandmom or auntie, wants the photos, or your friend wants the photos. I want to see what the kids look like. And I'm from the United States, and typical is that it would go on the outside of the refrigerator door. So you'd have these little magnets and stick the photos out on the door. And, when the new photo would come in, then you take down last year's photo and you put it in the drawer, and so on. Right. So grandmom is still asking, where is the photos that I want the kids' photos, right? And then people, you never send any photos. And so then what the people say is like, mom or grandmom, it's all on Facebook, or it's all on Instagram, or it's all on the cloud. And then they might say, where's this, what is it? So the folks get a smartphone, and they hook up grandma, show her how to use the smartphone, and to find the pictures of the kids, right? Or maybe to watch Netflix or something, download the streaming of your favorite shows, or things like that, right? But this is very typical of a low-skilled users, right? So even if they have these kind of low-skilled uses of the internet, they don't know how to acquire the skills to be able to use the internet for other sorts of behaviors. Okay, so as a public policy recommendation, this research is very strong, because it allows us to tell the government of Turkey, and other governments might benefit from this as well, that it's not enough just to build the infrastructure and to put up cell phone towers and to put broadband out to the villages. It's not enough to do that. It's also this human side where we social scientists come in, that we have to tell people, we have to help them to increase the skills. So this is an increasing risk for people who are no longer in school, or not getting the skills training in their jobs. And so in particular, it affects like kind of the elder population most strongly. The second variety of findings in here related to gender. So now this area of Turkey, the East Anatolia, is the more conservative, traditional part of the country. And so the patriarchal culture is still very strong, right? So the man is still in control of the household, and what happens in the household in this part of the country. And so what we identified is that the patriarchal culture might suppress women's use and skill development. So some of the men spoke about they don't want their wives to view. They used a very specific term, that meaning like inappropriate things or forbidden things, right? And my initial reaction was like a bit of a confusion, because I said to myself, gee, I think it's more men that are looking at generally I see more men looking at inappropriate things on the internet, by which I was thinking about pornographic things or something like that. Or, but this is not what they meant in Turkey. These men meant that they didn't necessarily want their wives or their women family members to get kind of ideas about like kind of gender equality or women's rights and those kinds of things. So to some extent, the men might suppress the use of the women in their households, because they don't want them to hear about ideas that might be coming in from outside of the country or from more liberal parts of Turkey. And the third one is, I realize now I didn't actually complete this one, but the other is that there's like some men who said that they didn't want their kids, and by this they meant kind of both the boys and the girls or their wives. They didn't want their families looking at things on the internet, because they felt that they wouldn't be able to afford the types of things that people would want. So as long as they're not on the internet, the only thing that they can see people consuming in the lifestyles is the people that are either on television, which is of course not very realistic, but more strongly those people in the community. And the people in the community are likely to have a similar level of economic status, and therefore their consumption patterns might be comparable to the consumption patterns of their own families. And so they said, they said very clearly something like, listen, I'm the only one in my family who works, and if my wife sees people taking these expensive vacations or buying things for the home, or if my kids, see the other kids getting expensive things, and they're going to want it. And so their concern was that as kind of the ability of the internet to build a reference group where people would see the consumption patterns of those who are not kind of part of their same social stratum. Okay, so next, please. Perhaps you all will, the organizers will focus, will post these, but we ended up with 5 high-skilled. Perhaps the organizers will post the slides at some point if anyone wants to go back. But the characteristics of the high-skilled internet users, there was 5 of them, and they tended to use the internet for a variety of purposes, right? So seeking information, reading the news, shopping, and social networking, gaming, watching videos, some for education, some for health information, and so on. Some did it economic use of the internet for e-commerce or for their jobs as well. And so these would be the folks that we see in that region as being kind of the most internet savvy, with the highest skills and benefiting from it most. Okay, next slide, please. And these are the characteristics of those that we interviewed who had low skills, and there were 3 of them. And so they primarily used it for social networking, like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and so on. And to a lesser extent, they used it for getting information or reading the news. And so this is kind of just in a very basic way, a small number, but you get the idea that the high-skilled users are using the digital, because they have the skills, they're using the digital sphere for a variety of purposes, and it's integrated into their life, whereas the low-skilled users are using it for social media primarily, and then to a lesser extent, things like looking up something or reading the news. So they're not very broad in their use. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is where I draw an end of my presentation. Thank you all very much for this. I ask you can please welcome to connect digitally. It's kind of an irony if I didn't ask you to connect digitally. So here's my email. Anybody is welcome to contact me. I have my Twitter account and also my LinkedIn address. So those are the best places to connect with me. And I also must mention that this research was funded by TÜBİTAK, which is the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey. And so I must give the credit where credit is due to the funding agency. So thank you very much. I know I've spoken about Turkey, but I hope that we can perhaps have some question and answer, and that maybe we will explore the broader implications of these findings for India and indeed for the other parts of the world as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for paying attention and for attending today. It's been my pleasure.
I think the journey that you took us through was very enlightening, especially in the Indian context. I think a lot of what you said will be very relevant, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Yes, we do have a lot of questions for you. If time permits, we'll at least take 4 to 5 questions, sir.
Please.
Yes, okay, great. So there is a question from one of our audience asking, which country do you think has more digital divide based on gender, and what is the specific reason for that?
Well, this is a difficult question to answer because perhaps I didn't mention, but in the literature, most of the digital divide studies are conducted in in the highest income, highest developed, and mostly in the Western countries. So European context, North America, Australia, and so on. And there are very few that are outside of the West. And so, and they're really not necessarily applicable to the rest of the world, places like South Korea or Singapore or Japan, right? And so this is one of the reasons why I didn't mention it, but one of the reasons why this study is noteworthy and groundbreaking is because it's of a population that is non-Western, and it's also so it looks like, okay, is it different cultural context, but it's also when you look at this north-south digital divide in the world, we're just beginning to look at the digital divide in the global south. So Turkey is a strange case because actually this chapter is from a book on digital divide in global south. And so I had to make a justification for, yes, there are some parts of the country of Turkey that fit this kind of global north part where it's highly developed, highly industrialized, and digitally connected. But it's this part that is more typical of the type of development you might see in the Caucasus region, say Azerbaijan, or in the Central Asian countries, Kazakhstan, and so on. And so therefore, this part is relevant for studying. So I would say that worldwide, we still struggle with the first level digital divide. So in many developing countries, there is simply a lack of access. And it may be a lack of access based on technology. That is, it's just not there. The infrastructure is not built. And it can also be a digital divide based on the economics. That is, the people cannot afford to use the technologies even if they're there. I would say generally in the global south, if I had to hypothesize, this would be an interesting study that I'm sure would be publishable. Actually, if we had comparative data, we would find most likely that the more traditional the cultures, the greater is the disparity along gender lines. And so this has to do with, in many traditional cultures, did not value or prioritize education for women and girls, and many women and girls were not involved in the public sphere, certainly not in like formal employment, and so on. And so these women would probably be the place to concentrate the resources, right? The education for girls and digital development for girls would be a priority, and especially in the low income nations in particular. That's a good question.
Very rightly put. So we have a question from Dr. Vigila Edwin Kennedy, who's our principal also. She's asking, future being digital, should countries work towards digital solidarity, like we work climate change?
Yeah, I believe, well, see, okay, the digital issues don't have a one size fits all worldwide. And so this is, I work in I'm in UAE, right, which is an authoritarian country. But we benefit from the fact that it's an authoritarian country that really seems to care about its people as well. Not only the Emirati people, but those of us who live here and build lives, right? So I think in general we ought to make arguments for digital inclusion. However, the nature of the argument might be something that would change depending upon the cultural and the political context of the nation. And so, for example, in the UAE, I would mention the digital divide. If girls and women were lagging behind, I would say I would um, I would mention it in the context that it's holding up the development of the country. That if you're keeping up, if you're holding down, or if there's an impediment experienced by half of the population, then this country can't advance, right? And so rather than other places, I might say, okay, it's a human right to have the digital access these days, right? So that we ought to add something to the UN Charter, a Declaration of Human Rights, about digital inclusion as a necessity for 21st century and beyond. That is the same as the people have a right to water, and the people have a right to breathe, and so on, right? But you see, it wouldn't fit here in the UAE, because it's just not. It's also the political context that is, if anything is meant to be if the government is meant to be criticized here, it must happen in a very indirect way. And so the sociologist can, in a sense, say there's all these reasons why we should enhance the digital inclusion of the population, including the poor and the old people and girls and women and people with disabilities, and all of these various factors, right? But how exactly you communicate it has to be like something that would be received by those who would be in the position to make those. But in general, I mean, for the doctors, what was it, Dr. Vigilia?
Dr. Vigila Kennedy. Dr. Kennedy.
Dr. Vigila. For Dr. Vigila's question, I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that there should be, there are aspects of digital inclusion included in SDGs. And so this kind of measurement and goal setting for the world. And so I think that, yes, it would be time for the world to get more of a sense of the need for digital inclusion.
One thing which I believe in today is social media is sort of changing the whole trend of media itself. We are not just only media consumers; we are also content creators. So that's sort of in one way, as much as digital inclusion is growing, this is also empowering people to become content creators in themselves. Of course, that automatically leads to dissemination of misinformation, etc. But this itself brings the power back to people.
Indeed. There's the Web 2.0, as it's called, has brought it has reduced the technical requirements to participate in the internet. So primarily in the Web 1.0, everyone sat down and did like HTML coding and CGIs and Java scripts and these kinds of things. And I think we have kind of a a general appreciation among the educated people in techie societies that everyone should know some level of coding, but the platforms have generally kind of reduced that need. So you can have a Twitter. It's basically a micro blog, and all you have to do is just type in. Used to be 140, now it's 280 characters, and hit send, and then it's out to the world, right? And strangely, I watched Muammar Gaddafi in Libya be ousted live via Twitter. I mean, it was really something, So there is that power for sure. But I also think that what we have seen in these big tech companies is about 90% of all data, big data, refers back to approximately 70 countries, 70 companies that are located in the United States and China. And so, I'm working on a topic called the data value chain. And so, this ability to collect and cull and process and benefit from data, as we've heard so many times, that data is the new oil. This is what they say here in the UAE, right? Data is the new oil. It's interesting that even at this point in time, the level of consolidation of digital capital, in a sense of who controls the big data, is way more intense at the early stages of this post-industrial age than it ever was in the capitalist and high industrial age, where this capital was in buildings and machineries and factories and infrastructure and so on. So I guess I have to say it's like yes, and yes, there's an empowerment process, but I think also as a sociologist, I will say that the big powers are still the major players, and it's difficult for the smaller voices to reach the ears of the people. They can easily be drowned out. So while we're not we are not censoring the voices of the less powerful in most countries, there may be a process through which they don't get the equal attention or equal play.
This is where, like in the previous session, we were talking to Professor Seema, and we were talking about the role of community radio. So where we go to the remotest corners of India, like in India especially, it's worked brilliantly in several places where the community radio system has helped reach the interior parts where there is no availability of electricity, or there is no availability of television. Still, with the limited resources available, community radio has played a huge role in itself.
Absolutely. And that's the interesting thing, is that a lot of people would think of something as print media like newspapers or radio as being kind of old forms, but they remain extremely relevant. And it's, in terms of media in the world, there is no one size fits all for all places. And so, I imagine I used to teach a course, take American students to the Fiji Islands, and we would go and live in a small village on one of the islands, and they have no electricity and minimal running water. But I mean, they're not suffering in a sense, because they have lived there for 2,000 years, so they know how to fish, they know how to grow their own food and build their own houses and things, right? So but the American students would think like, wow, these people don't have anything, and then, you just get to spend some time with them. And then they, here's these guys have a radio that has a crank, right? It has a dynamo kind of thing to crank it up, and then you listen to it. So they don't have to go into the big island to buy batteries, which would end up in the rubbish anyway, right? And so, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's all about like kind of the different media forms and how they serve the needs of the population. And so the digital isn't something that is, Okay, people should have the option to be digitally connected. I think that would be the general principle, but not all people find it useful or suitable to their particular. I'll also give you an example. There's a study of the digital divide in Niger, the sort of sub-Saharan, or it's in the edge of the Sahara Desert, the African country of Niger. And this was about 10 years ago. And there was this chap who had a mobile device, but basically he primarily had the mobile device because it was a status symbol. In effect, he had no one to talk to, like no one else that he knew had a mobile phone, and he somehow could afford a mobile phone, and he would show it to people. And this was actually an earlier part in kinds of theorizing about the digital divide that I have a book with Massimo Ragnetta on theorizing the digital divide. And most of the early theories were technical and Marxist or economic in terms of who gets it connects and who can't, and so on. And this was actually, I said, you can't explain the fact that somebody would spend their resources on a mobile device even if they couldn't in fact use it. You can't explain it through a technical or an economic principle. And so you go to Max Weber to say it's about status, right? It's about status, that this guy was like the first one in his village to have this mobile device. And so, the technical isn't everything. The economic isn't everything. There are other motivators that people have. I've seen people engage in completely irrational behaviors where, they're doing like these crowdsourced things like Wikipedia. And there's people aren't being paid, but they donate so much of their time and effort to kind of managing some of these pages, and then they get like a higher rating on Wikipedia, and it cannot be explained by just the economic, right? Because they're not getting paid. They must have some satisfaction that's coming out of it. Or sometimes the people also get legitimacy. Maybe how many followers you have on Twitter is a mark of okay, well, are you legitimate, right? If you hit a certain, I think I have about 4,000 Twitter followers, and I remember like hitting 2,000 and thinking like, hey, cool, but I mean, it's bizarre, right? Because like, is it really important? I mean, I guess so. It means that there's some audience of people who
I
are
have
following me.
arrived.
but it's certainly not. I don't think it's a way for me to share information. And maybe I'm of a certain age. We like Twitter better than some of the younger folks, like some of these others a bit better too. But I can't say it should always be just rational. Some people can be excluded for their own purposes. I mean, shoot, when I started my job at Miami University, there was this older professor who had been a professor since like the late 60s, and he was about 40 years into his career, and he said he didn't use computers. And at that time, it was about 2003, right? But think about it, right? Like these PCs came into use in the 80s or 90s. I got the internet in 1994. That was the first use of it. So you think about this guy as having, maybe 30 years of his career without the internet, then I guess maybe he had a point. And so, he was so well respected that people said, hey, can you please use this stuff? And he said, no, I'm not using it. And so everybody kind of, it was back to the 20th century. Somebody called and you write it on those pink slips of paper and say the message came in, and you hand it to him, and he kept his books, his grades in the little notebook, little graph paper notebook, and so on. So yeah.
Absolutely. Lovely. I think that's the beauty of social sciences, right? That nothing is exactly quantifiable and everything is interesting in itself. Varies. That's the beauty of it. Lovely. I guess we have come to the end of today's session. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Professor Muschert for taking out time and joining us for today's session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor. And in closing, may I just also give my appreciation to the organizers and the university, and also to yourself for inviting me here today. It's been a pleasure. I do want to say that we in the UAE are close in many ways to India, and so we're aware of what's happening in India, and our prayers are with you. And I would just wish you all God bless you, especially in this month of Ramadan. And namaskar to all of my colleagues and friends and the good people in India. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor. Really kind of you. Sir has been really kind enough to share certain material, and in the feedback form, you can please leave a note if you would like to share, that material with you regarding his research. It's very interesting to read. Please do leave a note and we will definitely get it across to you. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Thank you. And
we have one session left for the day today. We will be starting at 4:30. Please do tune in and definitely do stay tuned for the program that's coming up.